little girl's scream tore through the stillness of the woods. It was the kind of sound Scarlett Morgan had never heard in her 4 years as a ranger in Blackwood National Forest. The kind of sound that made the blood in her veins turn to ice. The kind of sound that told her something was wrong. Wrong in a way that was deeply, terrifyingly wrong. The sun was dropping fast, staining the Montana sky in heavy streaks of orange and deep violet. And there, amid the thick pine forest, a child, tiny, no more than 6 years old, was running as if chased by a nightmare. She wore a floral dress ripped to tatters, smeared with mud. Her face was soaked with tears. Her knees were scraped raw and bleeding. Her voice was hoarse from crying too long, too hard. "Mom. Mom, where are you?" Scarlett dropped everything in her hands and ran toward the sound. Her worn green ranger uniform snagged on branches as she pushed through the underbrush. The radio at her hip clacked against her belt, but she ignored it. The soles of her boots were thin and tired, and every step sent pain up her feet. But she did not slow down. Every second mattered. A lost child in the woods at dusk, alone and panicked, could mean tragedy. Blackwood Forest stretched over 3,000 acres, packed with dense ancient pines, hidden ravines, and slopes that could kill. This place had taken more lives than any other forest in the Montana region. If the girl's mother was out there somewhere, injured, or worse, they had to find her before darkness fully swallowed the woods. "Hey, sweetheart, stop running," Scarlett called after her, but the child was frantic, stumbling again and again over roots and stones, her small bare feet still forcing themselves forward in long, desperate strides. At last, Scarlett caught up. She gently took the little girl by the shoulders, just before the child could rush straight into Eagle's Drop, the most dangerous ravine in all of Blackwood, where the ground suddenly fell away into a 50-meter plunge. The girl turned, wide brown eyes flooded with terror, and then threw herself into Scarlett's arms, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. "I can't find my mom. I can't find my mom." Mom fell down and she doesn't move. There was so much blood near the big oak tree by the stream. "I ran to find someone to help, but I got lost. I don't know where my mom is." The words poured out without stopping, choked between gasps. Scarlett's heart clenched. She thought of her own mother, the woman who had died in a hospital bed when Scarlett was 7 because there was no money for treatment. She could not let that kind of heartbreak happen again. Not today. Not to this child. The situation was far worse than she had imagined. A woman was hurt somewhere in this vast forest. A frightened child trembled in her arms. Night was coming down fast, and the radio had no signal. Scarlett knew she was alone, just as she had always been alone for the past 20 years. But then, from the darkness beneath the tree canopy, came the sound of footsteps drawing nearer. If this story touched your heart, please press like to support the channel. Share this video with the people you love, and don't forget to subscribe to follow the next moving stories. Scarlett pulled the child tight against her, survival instinct surging hot and sharp. She nudged the child behind her and reached with one hand for the only pepper spray she carried. It was the smallest kind of weapon a forest ranger could have, but she was ready to use it if she had to. Her heart hammered in her chest as the footsteps drew closer, heavy and certain, as if whoever it was had no intention of hiding their presence. Then a figure stepped out of the darkness. The man was tall, probably over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the stance of someone used to being in control. The last light of dusk caught his angular face, revealing steel, cold gray eyes and a faint scar running from his left cheekbone down to his jaw. He wore a black shirt, black trousers, black leather shoes. Nothing like any hiker Scarlett had ever met. Everything about him radiated danger, from the way he moved without a sound, to the sharp gaze sweeping over her, and the trembling child behind her. Scarlett raised the pepper spray, her hand slightly shaking, but her voice steady. "Who are you? What are you doing out here?" The man stopped about 10 feet away, not taking another step. He looked at Scarlett, then down at the little girl peeking out from behind her leg, those gray eyes never changing expression. "I am at the cabin on the east side. I heard screaming." His voice was low and even, not threatening, but not warm either. "You need help." It was not a question, it was a statement. Scarlett did not lower the spray. She had lived long enough to know that not everyone who appeared out of the dark came with good intentions. But she recognized something else too. If this man had wanted to hurt them, he could have done it a long time ago. He was standing still, waiting, as if he respected her right to decide. "The child's mother is injured," she said, her tone still guarded. "I need to find her now." "Where?" "Near the oak tree that was struck by lightning, there is a small stream." That is what the child said. "But I think it could be the Eagle's Drop area." The man gave a short nod. "Lead the way. I will help." Scarlett hesitated. Every cell in her body was screaming not to trust a stranger who appeared in a dark forest. But time was not on her side. The child's mother was somewhere out there, maybe bleeding, maybe slipping away. The radio had no signal. She had no phone. And night was about to fall completely. She had no other choice. All right. Scarlett lowered the spray but kept it in her hand. But you walk behind me, and if you do anything suspicious, I will not hesitate. The man did not look offended. He only nodded again, as if her caution was entirely reasonable. Scarlett turned to Emma and crouched to the child's eye level. What is your name? Emma. The girl's voice was still trembling. Emma Turner, and my mommy is Rachel Turner. Emma, I am Scarlett. We are going to find your mom, okay? But you have to hold my hand tight and do what I say. Can you do that? Emma nodded, tears still sliding down her cheeks. The three of them started deeper into the forest. Scarlett went first, using her 4 years as a ranger to navigate in the dark. Emma clung to her hand, her small fingers ice-cold and trembling. The stranger followed behind, his footsteps almost silent. After about 5 minutes, Scarlett heard Emma's small, ragged breathing. The child was exhausted. Those bare feet had to be in terrible pain after everything she had been through. Then, without warning, Emma let go of Scarlett's hand. Before Scarlett could react, the child ran to the stranger and grabbed his hand. Scarlett froze, her heart jumping into her throat. But what surprised her most was not what Emma did. It was the man's reaction. He went still, only for a second, but Scarlett saw it clearly. Those cold, gray eyes flickered when he looked down at the small hand gripping his own, as if it had been a long time since anyone had touched him with that kind of trust, as if he did not know what to do with it. Then, slowly, he closed his fingers around Emma's hand. I will help you find your mom, he said, his voice lower than before. Come on. Scarlett did not know why, but in that moment, something in her eased. Maybe it was the way the child trusted him. Maybe it was the way he did not pull away from Emma. Maybe it was simply the instinct of someone who had learned to read people. But whatever the reason, Scarlett knew one thing. This man, no matter how dangerous he might be, would not hurt them tonight. At least, not tonight. Darkness swallowed the forest faster than Scarlett expected. The last light of dusk was completely gone now, replaced by the thick, heavy night of blackwood. Ancient pine canopies blocked both moonlight and stars, leaving everything around them as layers of black shadow piled on black shadow. Scarlett pulled a small flashlight from her belt, the only weak thread of light she had, and started leading the way. Rachel, she shouted into the night. Rachel Turner, can you hear me? Only echoes answered. Wind hissed through the treetops. Night insects began to sing, but there was no human voice. They moved deeper into the forest. Scarlett led the way, using 4 years of ranger experience to pick a path between trunks and brush. She knew this place like the lines of her own palm. Every trail, every stream bed, every danger point, but in a darkness like this, even the most seasoned people could make a deadly mistake. Emma clung tightly to her hand, small steps trying to keep up with an adult's stride. The child was not crying anymore, but Scarlett could feel the trembling in every finger. She squeezed Emma's hand harder, a silent reassurance, and the stranger walked just behind them, not too close, not too far. As they moved, Scarlett could not stop watching him from the corner of her eye. There was something strange about the way he moved in the dark. No stumbling, no hesitation. Every step was steady and nearly soundless, as if he was used to moving at night, used to becoming invisible in the woods. His gray eyes seemed able to cut through the darkness, sweeping every direction with a wary focus, like a predator guarding its territory. When they crossed a stretch of especially uneven ground, Scarlett saw him shift automatically, placing himself between Emma and a dangerous slope on the right. He did it naturally, without thinking, as if protection had been drilled into his instincts. And through the entire search, he showed no panic and no impatience. He did not pepper her with questions. He did not complain about the dark or the brutal terrain. He was simply quiet, intent, ready. The more Scarlett watched him, the more certain she became of one thing. This man was not an ordinary civilian. No one moved like that, reacted like that, stayed that calm in an emergency like this unless they had been trained, or unless they had lived in a world where danger was everyday life. But that question would have to wait. Right now, finding Rachel mattered more than anything. Rachel, Scarlett called again, her voice starting to go rough. Rachel Turner, Mom. Emma called too, her voice small and shaking. Mom, I'm here. I'm coming. They kept going, crossing a dry stream bed, climbing a gentle hill. then dropping into a narrow valley. With every passing minute, Scarlett's worry tightened. If Rachel was badly hurt, if she was bleeding, every second of delay could be the difference between life and death. After about 20 minutes, Scarlett realized they were nearing Eagle's Drop, the most dangerous ravine in Blackwood. She had witnessed too many accidents here. Inexperienced climbers, curious visitors who ignored warning signs. This ravine had taken at least 7 lives in the past 10 years. "Be careful," Scarlett said, her voice low. "We're getting close to the ravine. The ground could give way at any moment." The man nodded, his hand automatically settling on Emma's shoulder, keeping the child closer to him. They slowed, one careful step at a time. Scarlett swept the flashlight over the ground ahead, searching for any sign. A scrap of fabric, a smear of blood, anything. Then she heard it. At first, she thought it was only the wind, but when she stopped, holding her breath, she heard it more clearly. A faint sound, so weak it was almost swallowed by the restless murmur of the night forest. Amon. Scarlett turned toward it at once, her heart beating faster. "I heard something," she said quickly. "From the ravine." The man had heard it before she did. He was already moving that way, drawing Emma along in a protective grip. They reached the edge of Eagle's Drop. Scarlett shone the flashlight down, and her heart sank. There, about 16 feet below, on a narrow ledge between the cliff faces, a woman lay motionless, her hair spilled loose, one leg bent at an unnatural angle, and even in the weak beam of the flashlight, Scarlett could see the blood spread across the woman's forehead. "Mom!" Emma screamed, trying to wrench free of the man's hand and rush toward the ravine. "Mom!" Scarlett dropped to her knees fast, blocking the child. "Emma, calm down. Your mom is here. I can see your mom, but you have to stay here, okay? You have to let me go down and help your mom." Then she looked up at the stranger. In the darkness, his gray eyes caught a strange glint, not fear, but determination. "I'll go down first," he said, his voice allowing no argument. "You follow." And before Scarlett could react, he had already started climbing down the rock face. His movements so quick and precise it was almost unbelievable. Scarlett did not have time to stop him. The stranger was already climbing down the rock face with a speed and precision that were almost unreal, his hands catching each ledge as if he had done it 100 times. She watched him for a heartbeat, then turned quickly to Emma. "Stay right here. Sit down in this spot, and do not move. Do you hear me? I am going down to help your mom. Promise me you will sit still right here." Emma nodded, her tear-filled eyes locked on her mother's shape below the ravine. Scarlett started down. She was not as skilled as the man, but 4 years as a ranger in Blackwood had given her enough ability to handle terrain like this. One careful move at a time, she searched for holds, tested the rock's stability before shifting her weight onto it. The flashlight was clenched between her teeth, its beam wobbling with every motion. When Scarlett stepped onto the ledge where Rachel lay, the man was already there, kneeling beside the unconscious woman. He looked up at Scarlett, gray eyes grave. She is still breathing, pulses weak but steady. Scarlett shifted immediately into the working mindset of someone trained in first aid. She knelt beside Rachel, angling the flashlight over the victim to assess the injuries. What she saw made her chest tighten. Rachel's left leg was broken at the shin. Bent at an angle so unnatural, Scarlett had to fight not to flinch. Blood from the wound on her forehead had run down toward her temple, leaving a dark red smear through her brown hair. But the most important thing was that Rachel was still breathing, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. "She is unconscious, but she is alive," Scarlett said, partly to steady herself, partly to make sure Emma, sobbing above them, could hear. "A broken leg and a head injury. She needs a hospital immediately." She got to work. First, the head wound. Scarlett tore a strip of cloth from her jacket, folded it into a temporary dressing, and pressed it gently to the cut to slow the bleeding. Then the broken leg. She looked around, found 2 branches straight and sturdy enough nearby, likely fallen down with Rachel when she slipped. She removed her belt, using it along with her shoelaces to secure the branches along Rachel's leg, forming a makeshift splint. While Scarlett worked, she noticed the stranger pulling off his shirt. She was about to ask what he was doing when she saw him drape it carefully over Rachel, covering her upper body to keep her warm. And when the shirt came off, Scarlett saw his back was covered in scars. Not 1 or 2, but dozens of them, crossing and overlapping. Some long, like knife slashes. Some round, like bullet wounds. Some mottled, like burns. In the weak flashlight beam, his skin looked like a map of pain and violence. A record of years Scarlett could not bring herself to imagine. She looked away quickly, pretending she had not seen anything. but the image had already carved itself into her mind. Whoever this man was, he had been through hell. "Mom," Emma's voice carried down from above, raw with pain and desperation. "Mom, wake up. I am here. I am right here." Scarlett lifted her head, trying to make out the child's small shape at the edge. "Emma, your mom is going to be okay," she called up. "Your mom is just sleeping. Me and him, we are taking her to the doctor right now." But the moment the words left her mouth, Scarlett felt the hopelessness of their reality. They were at the bottom of a ravine, deep in the forest, in the middle of the night. Rachel needed emergency surgery, a hospital, doctors, equipment. But the radio had no signal. A phone could not reach anyone. An ambulance could not drive this far into the woods. And Scarlett could not carry an unconscious woman up a rock face 16 feet high, then push through nearly 2 miles of thick forest in the dark. They were trapped. She looked at the stranger, ready to say they had to find some way to call for help. But he had already stood, his hand reaching into his trouser pocket. A phone, not a regular phone. Scarlett recognized it instantly as a satellite phone, the kind she had only seen used by international rescue teams or the military. The kind of phone that could call from anywhere on Earth, even deep in a forest with no service. The man dialed a number and lifted the phone to his ear. Within seconds, someone answered on the other end. Marcus. His voice changed completely. It was no longer the low, steady voice of the man who had walked with her through the night. This was the voice of someone who gave orders, someone used to being obeyed. "Bring a helicopter. Now. Coordinates Eagles Drop, Blackwood National Forest. Severe injury. 15 minutes. He ended the call without waiting for a response. Scarlett stood there, mouth open. A helicopter, a satellite phone, and someone called him by name. She tried to replay what he had said about himself, but he had said nothing. He had never introduced himself. Not once. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice no longer steady. The man looked at her, gray eyes giving away nothing. "Vincent," he said, flat and brief. "Vincent Romano. And you do not need to worry. The helicopter will be here in 15 minutes. This woman will live." Then he turned back to Rachel, as if the conversation was over. Scarlett wanted to ask more. To know why a man who could summon a helicopter the way someone hailed a cab was out here in Blackwood at night. To know where the scars on his back came from. To know what he truly was. But Emma's crying echoed from above, and Scarlett knew this was not the time. For now, they only had to wait. 15 minutes passed like 15 hours. Scarlett sat beside Rachel, checking her breathing and pulse again and again, while Vincent kept watch at the edge of the ledge, his gray eyes sweeping the darkness as if he were waiting for something. Emma remained above, her crying fading into small, exhausted hiccups. Then Scarlett heard it, the thudding chop of helicopter blades. The sound came from far away, at first no more than a faint hum like insects, then growing louder, closer, until it rolled through the forest like thunder. A powerful searchlight ripped open the night, flooding Eagles Drop with brightness, turning darkness into daylight in a single instant. Scarlett raised a hand to shield her eyes and looked up. A black helicopter appeared against the sky. No markings. No visible registration numbers. No sign at all that it belonged to any rescue agency or hospital. Just a sleek black machine, large and ominous, dropping lower directly above them. The helicopter could not land inside the ravine, but it set down in a clearing nearby. Within minutes, Scarlett saw silhouettes descending on ropes from the helicopter. 3 men. The one in front was an Asian man in his 40s, hair cut short, his expression cool and professional. He was dressed in black from head to toe, and the way he moved made it clear this was not his first time doing something like this. The other 2 followed, also in black, carrying a professional stretcher and medical bags. They climbed down into the ravine with astonishing skill, as if the terrain meant nothing to them. When the lead man stepped onto the ledge, he looked straight at Vincent and dipped his head. "Boss," he said, "the helicopter is ready. St. Mary's Hospital has been notified. They are waiting." "Boss." The word rang in Scarlett's mind like an alarm bell. She looked at Vincent, then at the men in black, then back at Vincent. The pieces started snapping into place. The satellite phone, the unmarked private helicopter, men calling him boss, the scars across his back. This man was not a businessman, not a retired military officer, not anything Scarlett could explain in a harmless way. Vincent Romano was dangerous. The kind of dangerous she had only read about in newspapers or seen in movies. The kind of dangerous ordinary people were supposed to stay far away from. But at that moment, Rachel let out a weak moan. She was still unconscious, but she could worsen at any second. And these men, whoever they were, had professional medical equipment. There was no time for doubt. The two men in black went to work. They moved Rachel onto the stretcher quickly but carefully, stabilizing her neck and spine, checking vital signs. The way they worked made it clear they were not amateur rescuers. They were highly trained, maybe even more than the EMTs Scarlett had seen before. Meanwhile, the Asian man, the one Vincent had called Marcus, climbed up to the rim to retrieve Emma. Scarlett wanted to stop him, wanted to protect the child from these strangers, but she was too late. When Marcus came back with Emma in his arms, the little girl did not seem afraid. Maybe she was too exhausted, or maybe, at this point, anyone was better than being alone in the dark. Vincent stepped up beside Scarlett, his voice still calm, as if nothing unusual was happening. "You and the child are coming up in the helicopter with us. St. Mary's Hospital is about 30 minutes by air. It is the best hospital in the region." Scarlett shook her head, her self-protective instinct flaring. "I can't. I don't know who you are. I can't get on a helicopter with strangers like this." Vincent looked at her, his gray eyes giving nothing away. "Do you have any other choice?" Scarlett wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She had no other way to get Rachel to a hospital in time. An ambulance could not reach this deep in the forest, and Rachel needed surgery immediately. Still, she hesitated. Then Emma ran to her, gripping Scarlett's hand with small, ice-cold fingers. The child's brown eyes looked up at her, pleading, "Miss Scarlett, please come with me. I'm so scared. I don't want to be alone. Will you come with me? Please." Scarlett's heart softened. She looked down at the child, then up at Vincent, then toward Rachel being carried up to the helicopter. She did not trust these people. She did not know who they were or what they wanted. But a child was begging her to stay close, and a mother needed saving. Sometimes, the right choice is not the safe one. "All right," Scarlett said, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "I'll go." Vincent nodded, saying nothing more. He turned and led the way toward the helicopter. Scarlett lifted Emma into her arms and held her tight. She followed Vincent, stepping into the black helicopter, stepping into the world of dangerous strangers. As the helicopter rose, Scarlett looked down at Blackwood Forest, shrinking beneath them. She did not know what she was doing. She did not know where she was going. She did not know what waited ahead. But at least Rachel would be saved. And right now, that was enough. St. Mary's Hospital rose under the lights like a palace in the night. Scarlett had heard of it. The most expensive private hospital in the Montana region. The kind of place people like her would not even dare to walk into just to ask the price. The helicopter landed on a private helipad on the roof, and immediately a medical team was waiting with a stretcher and resuscitation equipment. But what caught Scarlett's attention was not the professionalism of the medical staff. It was the way they reacted when they saw Vincent. The moment he stepped off the helicopter, everyone seemed to stand a little straighter. Doctors dipped their heads in greeting. Nurses avoided looking him directly in the eye. A man in a suit, likely the hospital administrator, hurried out to meet him with an expression that was equal parts reverence and anxiety. "Mr. Romano, we have prepared the best operating room. Dr. Harrison, the leading specialist in orthopedic trauma, is waiting. Everything will be handled immediately." Vincent gave only a brief nod, saying nothing. But that single nod was enough. The entire machine of the hospital began to move as if this were the most urgent emergency they had ever seen. Rachel was taken into surgery within minutes. No complicated paperwork, no questions about insurance or ability to pay, only fast, efficient action. Scarlett stood in the corridor of the luxurious hospital, Emma still clutching her hand, feeling as if she had wandered into another world. Floors of shining marble, cream-colored walls hung with framed art, soft leather waiting chairs. Everything here breathed wealth and power, things she had never touched. The hospital administrator appeared again and led them to a separate area. "The VIP waiting room has been prepared," he told Vincent. "It has every amenity. If you need anything at all, just call." Vincent turned to Scarlett and Emma. "You two rest here. Someone will bring food and water. The surgery may take a few hours." Scarlett wanted to refuse. She was not used to this kind of luxury, not used to being served as if she mattered. But Emma was exhausted, the little girl's eyes drooping with fatigue and fear. Scarlett did not have the right to refuse out of pride. They stepped into the VIP lounge. The room was spacious, like a 5-star hotel suite, with plush sofas, a large screen television, and a small table already set with tea and pastries. Scarlett guided Emma to the sofa and covered her with a soft blanket folded neatly there. When Emma began to drift off from sheer exhaustion, Scarlett rose and faced Vincent. He stood by the window, looking out into the night sky, his back to her. Without the black shirt, he wore a jacket Marcus had handed him on the helicopter, hiding the scars. "Why?" Scarlett asked, her voice quiet but clear. Vincent turned. gray eyes on her. Why what? Why did you do all of this? The helicopter, the hospital, the cost. These women are strangers. You don't owe them anything. Vincent was silent for a long moment, as if weighing the answer. Then he spoke, his voice low and even. You ran into a dark forest to save a child you did not know. You did not know who she was. You did not know what was happening. You did not know what danger was waiting. And you ran anyway. Have you asked yourself why? Scarlett could not answer. I am only doing the same thing, Vincent continued. No reason. No explanation. Sometimes people help each other simply because they can. Before Scarlett could say anything more, the lounge door flew open. An older woman rushed in, eyes red, silver hair loose, her face full of worry and tears. Where is Emma? Where is Rachel? She cried, her voice thick with sobs. I'm Gloria Turner, Rachel's mother. The hospital called me. Where is my granddaughter? Where is my daughter? Emma woke at the sound, saw the woman, and burst into tears. Grandma. Gloria ran to her and hugged her hard, tears pouring. She cried and laughed at the same time, smoothing her granddaughter's hair, kissing the child's forehead again and again. You're okay. You're okay. Thank God. Thank God. Then she looked up at Scarlett and Vincent with wet eyes. You saved my daughter. You saved my granddaughter. I don't know how to thank you. I don't know what to say. Scarlett stepped closer and set a hand on Gloria's shoulder. Rachel is in surgery. The doctors say she will be okay. Gloria gripped Scarlett's hand, squeezing like it was a lifeline. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And in that strange, luxurious room, surrounded by a grandmother's tears and a child's soft sobbing, Scarlett suddenly understood that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. The night stretched on as if it had no ending. The clock on the wall said it was past midnight, but to Scarlett, every minute felt like an hour. Gloria sat in the corner, fingers tight around a rosary, her lips moving in a whisper of prayer. Emma had been asleep for a long time, her head resting on Scarlett's thigh, the steady breath of exhaustion rising and falling. Scarlett sat perfectly still, afraid that any movement would wake the child. She looked down at Emma's small face. Tear tracks dried on her cheeks, and felt her heart draw tight. This little girl had been through too much for one night. The lounge door opened softly. Vincent stepped in, carrying a tray of food and 2 cups of hot coffee. Somewhere along the way he had changed clothes. Now he wore a plain white shirt, hiding the scars Scarlett had glimpsed by accident. He set the tray on the table and offered 1 cup to Gloria first. Drink this, he said, his voice gentler than Scarlett had heard from him before. It will be a while before we hear anything. Gloria looked up, exhausted, but still full of gratitude. Thank you, sir. Truly thank you. Vincent said nothing, only nodded, then walked over to Scarlett. He placed the other cup of coffee on the small table beside her, along with a plate holding a sandwich and a thin blanket folded neatly. You need to eat too, he said, and stay warm. Hospitals get cold at night. Scarlett wanted to refuse, but the smell of the hot coffee was too tempting. She could not remember the last time she had eaten anything, maybe a quick lunch the day before. Carefully, she lifted Emma's head, slid a small pillow into place, then reached for the coffee. Thank you, she said, her voice rough with fatigue. Vincent sat in the chair across from her, keeping just enough distance to avoid pressure, but close enough for conversation. Under the soft lighting of the VIP lounge, his face looked less frightening, and for the first time Scarlett realized he might not be as old as she had assumed, maybe around 36, 37, but those gray eyes carried the weariness of someone who had lived more than his years. How long have you been a ranger? Vincent asked, his tone unexpectedly mild. Scarlett was surprised by the question. She had not thought he was the kind of man who made small talk. 4 years, she answered. I've been in Blackwood since I graduated. Hard job, lonely. Scarlett looked at him, wondering why he cared. I'm used to it, she said. I'm not good in crowds. They were quiet for a while. Gloria had drifted asleep in her chair, the rosary still curled in her hand. The hospital was so still, Scarlett could hear the steady hum of the air conditioning. Do you have family? Vincent asked. Scarlett hesitated. She was not used to sharing herself with strangers. But something about this long night, the fatigue and tension, made her loosen her usual guard. My grandmother, she said. She's the only one I have left. Your parents. My mom died when I was 7. Cancer. No money for treatment. My father left before that. Scarlett did not know why she was telling this to a stranger. Maybe because it was too late in the night. Maybe because she was too tired. Or maybe because of the way Vincent looked at her. Not with pity, but with understanding. I lost my parents when I was 14, Vincent said, his voice low and even, both at the same time. Scarlett lifted her gaze. In that moment, she saw something in those cold gray eyes. Pain. Old, buried deep, but still there. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Long time ago," Vincent replied. "But you never really forget. You understand that, don't you?" Scarlett did. She understood better than most. They did not say anything more, but in that silence, something invisible was tied between them. Two strangers from completely different worlds, carrying the same kind of wounds that time could not heal. Scarlett finished the coffee, ate a few bites of the sandwich, and then fatigue hit her like a wave. Her eyelids grew heavy. Her head began to nod. She tried to fight it, but her body was drained after the long night. She did not remember when she fell asleep. She only knew that when she woke, a thin blanket had been draped over her. Emma was still sleeping beside her, shifted into a more comfortable position. And Vincent was still there, in the chair across the room, gray eyes turned toward the window. He had been awake all night, watching over them. Scarlett did not know what to make of that. She reached for her phone and checked the screen. Her heart sank. 3 missed calls from her grandmother. The timestamp showed the last call had been 2 hours ago. Maggie had been calling all night, and Scarlett had not heard, because her phone was on silent. Scarlett hurriedly called back, her heart beating fast. After a few rings, her grandmother's voice came through, thin with worry. "Scarlett, is that you? Where are you? I've been calling and calling. Are you all right?" "I'm okay, Grandma," Scarlett said quickly, forcing her voice to stay calm. "I'm sorry. I had to work the night shift. There was an emergency in the forest. I didn't hear the phone. Have you eaten? Are you coughing?" "I'm fine. Go back to sleep. I'll be home as soon as I can." She ended the call and let out a long breath. Lying to her grandmother was the thing she hated most, but she could not explain this situation. She could not tell her she was in a lavish hospital with a stranger she suspected might be a criminal. When Scarlett looked up, she found Vincent watching her. He had heard the conversation. His gray eyes showed no emotion, but Scarlett had the feeling he had memorized every word she said. "What is your grandmother sick with?" he asked, his voice unexpectedly gentle. Scarlett hesitated for a second, then answered. "Lung cancer. Late stage." Vincent did not speak. He only nodded, then turned back to the window. But Scarlett had the feeling this conversation was not over. The first light of dawn began to spill through the lounge windows when the door opened. "Doctor." Harrison stepped in, still in surgical scrubs, but the smile on his face said everything before he even had a chance to speak. Gloria sprang to her feet, fingers clenched around her rosary. Emma woke, brown eyes wide with fear. "The surgery was a success," Dr. Harrison said, his voice warm and reassuring. "We stabilized the fracture and treated the head wound. She is awake, and she is asking about her daughter." Emma did not need to hear another word. She jumped off the sofa and ran toward the doorway, only stopping when she realized she did not know where her mother was. Gloria hurried after her, tears already beginning to spill. "Doctor," Harrison smiled and led them out. Scarlett stood up, ready to follow, but her feet stalled. She looked down at her rumpled ranger uniform, filthy with dirt and sweat from the night before. She was not family. She was only a stranger who had happened to be there. "You should come," Vincent said, rising from the chair he had sat in all night. "The child will want you there." Scarlett looked at him, then nodded. Together they followed Dr. Harrison to the recovery room. Rachel lay in the hospital bed, her skin pale, her left leg bandaged and elevated, her head wrapped in clean white gauze. But her eyes were open, bright and clear, and the moment she saw Emma run in, Rachel began to cry. "Baby," she whispered, her voice weak but full of love. "My baby." Emma climbed onto the bed, careful not to touch her mother's leg, and wrapped her arms around Rachel. Mother and daughter cried together, Gloria standing beside them, tears streaming down her cheeks. Scarlett stayed near the doorway, her throat tight. She thought of her own mother, of those final moments in a hospital bed, of thin arms holding her one last time before letting go. Not everyone is lucky enough to hold the person they love again. Rachel and Emma were luckier than most. After a while, Rachel lifted her head, red-rimmed eyes searching for someone. When she saw Scarlett standing by the door, her eyes widened. "You are the one who saved my daughter," Rachel said, her voice trembling. "Emma told me. You ran when you heard her screaming. You found me." Scarlett stepped closer, not knowing what to say. "I only did what anyone would have done." "Not everyone would." Rachel shook her head, tears still falling. "You saved my life. And you," she added, turning her gaze toward Vincent behind Scarlett. My mother said you called a helicopter, brought me to the hospital. I don't know how to thank you. Vincent stepped forward, gray eyes on Rachel, calm and unreadable. You don't need to thank me, he said. And you don't need to worry about the cost. Everything has been paid. The surgery, the room, the medication, rehabilitation, all of it. Rachel stared, as if she had misheard. What did you say? I can't. This is the most expensive private hospital in the region. The cost has to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. I will pay you back, no matter how long it takes. No, Vincent said, shaking his head. This is not a loan. This is a gift. You do not need to repay anything. But why? Rachel asked, confusion rising in her voice. You don't know me. I'm a stranger. Vincent was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Scarlett. Their eyes met briefly, and Scarlett saw something in those gray eyes she could not name. Someone asked me the same thing last night, Vincent said, and the answer is still the same. Sometimes people help each other simply because they can. Rachel started to protest again, but Gloria placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder and gave a small shake of her head. She understood that with a man like Vincent, refusing could be an insult, and they did not have any better choice. Thank you, Gloria said, her voice breaking. Thank you for saving my daughter, my granddaughter. Our family will never forget this. Vincent only nodded, then stepped back, as if gratitude made him uncomfortable. Scarlett stood there, watching the man she had met only hours earlier in a dark forest. The man with steel-cold eyes, with a body marked by scars, with men who called him boss. The man with money from a place she did not dare imagine. And yet also the man who had taken off his shirt to cover an injured stranger, who had stayed awake all night watching over a child who was not his, who had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for a woman he had never met. Who was he, really? Scarlett did not know, but she knew one thing. She no longer looked at him with only suspicion. After Rachel was stable, and Emma had finally calmed in her mother's arms, Scarlett knew it was time for her to leave. Maggie was home alone, waiting for her. And Scarlett had lied, telling her she was working an extra shift. She needed to get home before her grandmother grew even more worried. She said goodbye to Gloria and Rachel, promising she would come back to visit when she could. Emma hugged her one last time, brown eyes lifted with gratitude. Thank you, Miss Scarlett, Emma said. You're my hero. Scarlett smiled, smoothed the little girl's hair, and stepped out of the hospital room. When she reached the main lobby, Vincent was already there waiting, car keys in his hand. I'll take you home, he said, in a tone that did not accept argument. Scarlett shook her head at once. No, I'll take the bus. Vincent looked at her, one corner of his mouth lifting slightly, as if he were holding back a smile. The first bus to the Blackwood area is at 6 in the morning. It's just after 4 now. You plan to wait 2 hours here. Scarlett wanted to protest, but she knew he was right. She had lived here long enough to know the bus schedule, and she did not have the money for a taxi. The little cash in her wallet would only cover a few meals for the coming week. Her silence was an answer. Come on, Vincent said, then turned and headed toward the exit. Scarlett stood still for a second, wrestling with her pride. But in the end, exhaustion and worry for her grandmother won. She followed him. A sleek black SUV was waiting in the VIP parking area. Marcus sat in the driver's seat and gave a small nod when they climbed in. Vincent opened the back door for Scarlett, then slid into the seat beside her instead of the front the way she expected. The car rolled forward in silence. The city was still asleep, streets empty beneath pale yellow streetlights. Scarlett stared out the window, trying not to think about the man sitting beside her, the man who had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on strangers without blinking. Your grandmother, Vincent said at last, breaking the quiet. You said she has late-stage lung cancer. How is she being treated? Scarlett turned to look at him. She did not want to talk about this, but something in those gray eyes, in the way he asked as if he truly cared, made it hard to stay silent. The medication is expensive, she said softly. 3 times what I make in a month as a ranger, and my insurance isn't good enough to cover it. I'm contract staff, not permanent. So what do you do? Scarlett let out a thin laugh, not a sound with any joy in it. I work 2 other jobs on top of this, she said. Bartending at night, cleaning cabins for tourists on weekends, anything that brings in more money, but it's still not enough. It's never enough. He was quiet for a long time, gray eyes on her with something Scarlett could not read. How long have you been fighting alone? The question hit something deep inside her, a place she had tried to protect for years. Scarlett opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. How long had she been fighting alone? Since her mother died, since her father left, since she was pushed into foster care and had to figure everything out. Since Daniel hit her for the first time and she realized no one was coming to save her. Her whole life. The answer was her whole life, but she did not say it. She only turned her face away, looking out the window, trying to swallow the tight knot in her throat. Vincent did not push. He understood her silence better than 1,000 words. The SUV stopped in front of Scarlett's cabin as dawn began to blush the horizon. Seeing it in the morning light, Scarlett suddenly realized how shabby it looked. The roof sagged in places, patched where it leaked. The old awning was peeling. One of the windows had cracked glass, taped together with strips of duct tape. The paint was faded and flaking. This was the place she had called home for 4 years. And now a man who had just paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for strangers was seeing where she lived. "Thanks for the ride," Scarlett said quickly, reaching for the door handle. "Scarlett." She stopped and turned back to Vincent. He pulled a small business card from his jacket and held it out. The card was black, with no name, no title, only a phone number printed in silver ink. "If you need anything," Vincent said, his voice low and serious. "Anytime, call me." Scarlett stared at the card, then looked up at Vincent. She wanted to refuse. She wanted to say she did not need anyone's help. She wanted to say she had taken care of herself her whole life and would keep doing it. But something in his gray eyes made her unable to say no. She took the card and slipped it into her pocket. "Thank you," she said, then opened the door and stepped out. As the black SUV drove away, Scarlett stood there watching, the card heavy in her pocket like a promise she did not know whether she should believe. Scarlett pushed open the cabin door, the rusty hinges squealing in the early morning. The moment she stepped inside, she saw Maggie sitting in the old armchair by the window, a thin blanket wrapped around her narrow shoulders. Maggie had been staring outside, but at the sound of the door she turned, and her eyes, clouded by age, brightened with relief. "You're home," she said, her voice rough. "I was so worried." Guilt flooded Scarlett all at once. Maggie had stayed up all night waiting, even with her body so frail, even with cancer slowly stealing her strength day by day. "Why didn't you sleep?" Scarlett hurried to her and knelt beside the chair. "You need to rest." As if in answer, Maggie began to cough, dry, deep coughs, coming from her chest, sounding like paper being torn. Scarlett grabbed the glass of water from the table and held it to her lips, waiting until the coughing passed. When Maggie finally settled, her old eyes studied her granddaughter with worry. "Where were you all night?" she asked, weak but still full of care. "You said you were working an extra shift, but I know your shift doesn't last that long." Scarlett sank into the small chair beside her and let out a breath. She did not want to lie, but she could not tell the whole truth, either. "A little girl got lost in the forest," she began, choosing each detail carefully. "Her mother fell into a ravine and was badly hurt. I heard the girl screaming and ran to help. I had to get them to the hospital." Maggie listened, her eyes shining with concern and fear. "Are they all right?" "The mother had surgery," Scarlett said. "The doctor says she'll be okay. The little girl is safe too." Maggie nodded, relief softening her face. But then her gaze held Scarlett with something deeper, as if she could see through the shell Scarlett was trying to keep in place. "You did all of that alone." Scarlett hesitated. She thought of Vincent, of the black helicopter, of the lavish hospital, of the business card sitting in her pocket. But she could not tell Maggie those things. How could she explain that she had boarded a helicopter with a stranger she suspected might be a criminal? How could she explain that this man had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for people he did not know? "Someone helped me," she said vaguely. "A hiker I ran into." Maggie was quiet for a moment, her thin fingers stroking Scarlett's hand. Then she asked, her voice gentle, but heavy with meaning. "Scarlett, is there anyone who takes care of you?" The question stopped Scarlett cold. It echoed in her head like a bell, tangled with another question she had heard only hours earlier. "How long have you been fighting alone?" Vincent's voice, low and steady, rose in her memory. Gray eyes watching her with something she could not name. Not pity, not curiosity, but as if he understood, truly understood, what it felt like to fight alone in a world that did not care. Scarlett looked at her grandmother, the only person left in this life who loved her. Maggie was gravely ill, living day to day while waiting for death, and yet still worrying about Scarlett more than herself. "I don't need anyone to take care of me," Scarlett said, her tone harder than she meant it to be. "I can handle myself." Maggie did not answer. She only looked at her granddaughter with sad eyes, as if she knew Scarlett was lying, as if she knew that behind that strength was a young woman who was tired, drained, carrying far too much. "Go to sleep, Grandma," Scarlett said, gently helping her stand. "I'll take care of breakfast." She guided Maggie back to bed, tucked the blanket around her, then returned to her own room. The little space barely held a twin bed and an old dresser. Scarlett lay down, staring at the ceiling where hairline cracks ran like faint veins, and felt exhaustion roll over her like a wave. But she could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those gray eyes, cold as steel, sharp as a blade. Yet when they looked at her, there seemed to be something warmer underneath, as if behind all that ice, a fire was still burning, slow and hidden. Who was he, really? Why did he help strangers? Why did he care about her, a broke forest ranger he had met only once? Scarlett had no answers. She only knew the black business card in her pocket felt heavy, like a promise. And that night, for the first time in years, Scarlett thought about a man before she finally fell asleep. A week passed as if that night had never happened. Scarlett returned to the routines of her ordinary life, to patrol shifts that stretched from early morning to late afternoon, to extra nights working at the bar in town, to caring for Maggie whenever she could steal a moment. She kept moving without pause, as if staying busy could erase the memory of those cold, gray eyes, but she could not forget. Each night, lying on her worn-out bed, Scarlett found herself thinking about Vincent, about the way he climbed down the cliff in the dark, about the way he pulled off his shirt and covered Rachel without hesitation, about the way he stayed awake all night in the hospital, watching over her and Emma as if they mattered, about the question he asked her in the car. How long have you been fighting alone? The black business card stayed in the nightstand drawer. Scarlett took it out more than once, her finger tracing the phone number printed in silver ink, but she never called. She did not know what she would say, and she did not want to owe anyone anything more. Maggie grew weaker by the day. The coughing fits each night became worse, and there were times she coughed up blood. Small red spots staining the white handkerchief Scarlett had to wash every morning. The medicine Maggie was taking no longer worked, but the better medication was too expensive. So expensive Scarlett could not even let herself think about it. Then that morning came. Scarlett had just woken and stepped outside to breathe the clean Blackwood air, the way she did every day. But she stopped short when she saw something sitting on the porch steps. A box. Not large, but carefully wrapped in plain brown paper. No return address. No postage. Someone had placed it here in the night. Scarlett picked it up and carried it inside. She opened it cautiously, and her heart missed a beat when she saw what was inside. Medicine. Not the cheap medicine she had been buying for Maggie. This was the most expensive, most effective targeted medication for lung cancer on the market. The kind the doctor had mentioned once, and Scarlett had shaken her head, because the price was equal to a full year of her salary. There was enough here for at least 3 months of treatment. Inside the box, resting on top of the bottles, was a small slip of paper. For your grandmother. V. Scarlett stood there, staring at the note in her hand, and felt anger flare hot in her chest. How dare he do this? Who did he think she was? A beggar who needed charity. She did not need anyone's pity. She did not need help from a man she did not even know how he made his money. She had carried her life on her back for 20 years, and she did not need anyone coming to rescue her. Scarlett wanted to throw the box away. Wanted to call Vincent and scream that she was not a charity case. Wanted to prove she was not weak, not someone who needed sheltering. But then she heard coughing from the next room. Dry, painful coughing, drawn out, and relentless. The sound of Maggie trying to hold it back so her granddaughter would not worry. The ragged gasp afterward, as if her lungs were burning. Scarlett stood there with the box in her hands, tears sliding down her face. Maggie was dying. Every day, the disease took another piece of her, and Scarlett, working herself to the bone, still could not afford the medication that might ease her pain. Did pride matter more than Maggie's life? Scarlett knew the answer. She swallowed her tears, swallowed her pride and stubbornness with them, and walked into Maggie's room. She helped her sit up, poured water, and took one pill from the new box. New medicine, she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. The doctor wrote a new prescription. Maggie did not ask anything more. She only looked at Scarlett with old, understanding eyes, as if she knew something was happening, but did not want to make it harder for her granddaughter. She swallowed the pill and lay back down to sleep. That night, for the first time in months, Maggie did not cough. Not once. No painful wheezing. No harsh gasps for breath. No blood spots on a handkerchief. Only peaceful sleep. Deep and steady, as if the cruel disease had loosened its grip, at least for a little while. Scarlett sat by the bed, watching Maggie's face soften in sleep, and she cried. She cried in silence, tears sliding down her cheeks, not making a sound. She cried from relief, from guilt, from gratitude, from anger. She cried because a stranger had done what she could not do for the person she loved most. And in the darkness of the battered cabin, Scarlett whispered 2 words she knew would never reach the ears that needed to hear them. "Thank you." 2 weeks had passed since the mysterious box appeared on Scarlett's porch. Maggie was noticeably better. The coughing had eased, and for the first time in months, she could sleep through the night without being ripped awake by the pain in her chest. Scarlett watched her every day, seeing color slowly return to those once ashen cheeks, seeing her shuffle around the cabin without having to stop and rest after every few steps. And Scarlett did not know what she was supposed to feel. Gratitude. Of course. Anger. Still there, smoldering. Curiosity. More than ever. Scarlett still had not called Vincent. She did not know what she would even say. "Thank you for medicine I never asked for. I'm furious you thought I needed charity." She did not know. That afternoon, Scarlett was patrolling the eastern side of Blackwood, where massive rocks overlooked the deep valley below. It was one of the forest's most beautiful places. A spot tourists came to watch the sunset, but today there were no tourists. Only a lone figure sitting on the largest rock, back turned toward her. Scarlett recognized the silhouette immediately. Vincent. She stopped, her heartbeat quickening. Just a little. Part of her wanted to turn away, pretend she had not seen him, but another part, the part she did not want to admit existed, stepped toward him before she could think. As she got closer, Scarlett realized something was different about Vincent. He did not look cold and controlled the way he had that night in the forest. His shoulders were slightly slumped. His head was bowed. Those gray eyes stared out over the valley as if he were searching for an answer to a question only he knew. He looked tired. Truly tired. Not the kind of tired that came from missing sleep, but the kind that came from somewhere deeper than the body. Scarlett stopped a few steps away, unsure what to say, but Vincent had already sensed her presence. "Ranger," he said, without turning around. "Am I breaking any forest rules?" Scarlett did not answer the question. Instead, she stepped closer, stopping beside the rock. "What are you doing out here?" Vincent was silent for a long time, eyes still fixed on the valley. "Hiding," he said at last. "Hiding from myself." Scarlett did not understand what he meant, but she did not push. Instead, she sat down on the rock beside him, leaving just enough space between them. They sat in silence for a while, with only the wind moving through the treetops and distant bird song. Then Scarlett spoke, her voice gentler than she intended. "The medicine." Vincent turned his head toward her, waiting. "Why?" Scarlett asked. "Why did you do that?" Vincent did not answer right away. He held her gaze for a long moment, gray eyes deep as if he were reading her soul. Then he turned back to the valley. "You said you worked 2 jobs on top of this," he began, voice low and steady. "Bartending at night, cleaning cabins on the weekends. And it still isn't enough to buy the medicine for her. You're being forced to choose between eating and keeping someone you love alive." Scarlett felt her throat tighten. "You should not have to make that choice," Vincent continued. "No one should have to make that choice. And I have the ability to help, so why wouldn't I?" "That's charity," Scarlett said, her voice harder than she meant it to be. "I don't need pity." Vincent turned toward her, and for the first time since they met, Scarlett saw something like a smile touch his mouth. Not a happy smile, a sad one, full of understanding. "It isn't charity," he said. "It's the only thing I know how to do. Use money to solve a problem. I'm not good at comforting people. I'm not good at saying the right things. But I have money, and if money can help someone, then at least it means something." Scarlett looked at him, feeling the anger inside her loosen, little by little. She still did not fully understand this man, but she was beginning to see something behind the cold exterior. "You said you're hiding," she said softly. "Hiding from what?" Vincent was quiet for a long time, then let out a breath. "There's an important decision I have to make," he said, his voice weary. "The kind of decision that will affect a lot of people. And I don't know which choice is the right one." Scarlett did not ask more. She knew there were secrets he could not share, worlds she did not belong to. But she could sit here beside him, in silence. They stayed like that until the sun began to sink, painting the sky in streaks of orange and deep violet. They talked about small things, about the forest, about the weather, about the trails Scarlett patrolled. Nothing deep, nothing forced. When Scarlett finally stood to leave, she realized she had been there longer than she meant to be. Much longer. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For the medicine. My grandmother is doing much better." Vincent gave a small nod, saying nothing. Scarlett turned and started walking away, but after a few steps, she stopped and looked back at him. "You can come here any time you need to hide," she said. "I won't report you for breaking any rules." Vincent looked at her, and for the first time, Scarlett saw a warm flicker in those cold gray eyes. As she walked on, she did not look back again, but she knew he was watching her. And she knew something else too, something she did not want to admit to herself. She had started to wait for these meetings, to wait to see him, to wait to hear that deep voice, to wait to sit beside him in silence. And that frightened her more than anything she had ever faced in her life. A month passed, and Scarlett could no longer deny that her life had changed. Her meetings with Vincent on the rock that overlooked the valley had become a habit, sometimes once a week, sometimes more. They never set a time, and yet, somehow, they always found each other there, as if an invisible thread kept drawing them back to the same place. They talked, about small things at first. Then, little by little, about things that went deeper. Vincent lent her books, classic novels she could not afford to buy. She told him about the forest, about rare birds, about hidden trails only she knew. Then one day, Scarlett began to talk about her past. She did not know why she did it. Maybe it was the way Vincent listened, without judgment, without pity, only quiet attention, as if every word she spoke mattered. She told him about childhood and the foster care system, about families who took her in and then sent her back like a defective product, about the first home that locked her in a closet when she did something wrong, about the second foster father who looked at her in a way that made her shiver every night, about how she learned to become invisible, to become small, so no one would notice her. And then she told him about Daniel. Vincent sat in silence when she said that name, but Scarlett noticed his jaw tighten. "I met him when I was 24, she said, her voice calm, as if she were telling someone else's story. He was handsome, polite, saying all the things I wanted to hear. I thought I had found someone who would love me, but after a few months, he started to change." She did not give details. There was no need. The bruises, the nights of crying in silence, the apologies, and then the violence again, the way she had believed she deserved it. "He broke my ribs," she said at last. "That was when I realized if I did not leave, I would die. I ran here, to Blackwood, where he could not find me." Vincent did not speak for a long time. When she glanced at him, she saw his gray eyes darken, and something dangerous, something primal, flickered there. "Is he still alive?" Vincent asked, his voice colder than she had ever heard. Scarlett did not answer. She did not know whether Daniel was still alive. She only knew she did not want to know. They kept meeting after that. Vincent never mentioned Daniel again, but Scarlett felt something had shifted. The way he looked at her, the way he protected her without letting her see it, the way he always seemed to appear exactly when she needed someone nearby. Then that day came. Scarlett had finished the book Vincent lent her and wanted to return it. She knew where his cabin was. He had shown her once during a conversation. A large cabin deep in the forest, a place he said was for resting. She arrived in the afternoon, thinking it would take only a few minutes to return the book and leave. When she got there, she saw the cabin door slightly open. She knocked, but no one answered. She pushed the door and stepped inside, already about to call Vincent's name, but the words died in her throat. Inside the cabin was not the peaceful scene she had imagined. At least 6 men sat around a large table, all dressed in black, all radiating danger. On the table, stacks of cash were piled high, and more frightening than anything, sleek black guns lay neatly beside them. And at the head of the table, Vincent stood, spine straight as a ruler, gray eyes cold as ice. "Find the traitor." His voice rang out, nothing like the voice Scarlett had grown used to hearing. Cold, ruthless, full of authority. "Clean it up. I do not want any traces left." The book slipped from Scarlett's hand and hit the floor with a loud crack in the dead silence. Every head turned toward her. The men shot to their feet, hands moving toward their guns. Marcus, the man she had met that night in the forest, stepped toward her with a threatening look, but Scarlett did not look at them. She looked only at Vincent, and she saw it, in the instant before he could hide it. Panic. For the first time since they met, Scarlett saw panic in those gray eyes, not because she had seen what she was not supposed to see, but because she had seen who he truly was. "Scarlett," Vincent said, his voice changing, softer, as if trying to soothe her. "Let me explain." But she did not listen. She turned and ran, out of the cabin, into the forest, running as if her life depended on it. She heard Vincent calling her name behind her, but she did not stop. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the cold wind against her face. She had known. From the first night, she had known he was dangerous. She had seen how the men called him boss. She had seen the scars on his back. She had known his money did not come from anything clean, but she had let herself forget. Let herself believe that maybe, Maybe he was different. Let herself begin to care about him, and now the truth had slapped her in the face. Vincent Romano was not a good man. He was the very thing she had been running from her whole life. Darkness. 3 days passed, like 3 years. Scarlett did not patrol the eastern section anymore. She did not go to the rock that overlooked the valley. She did not go anywhere she might run into Vincent. She worked the farthest reaches of Blackwood, came home as late as she could, and lay awake on her worn-out bed, staring at the cracked ceiling through the long nights. Maggie noticed something was wrong. She asked. Scarlett only shook her head, saying she was tired from work. Maggie did not believe her. Scarlett knew that. But she did not press. On the third night, rain poured over Blackwood as if the sky itself were crying. Scarlett sat in the cabin, listening to the rain hammer the tin roof, trying to read a book but unable to focus. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again. Sleek black guns, stacks of cash, Vincent's voice, cold as ice. Clean it up. She had been wrong. She had let herself be soft. She had let herself trust someone she should never have trusted. She had a knock at the door. Scarlett jerked upright and stared toward it. Maggie had been asleep for hours. No one visited them at this time, especially not in a storm like this. She stood, her hand reaching for the wooden stick she kept by the door for protection. She moved toward the door, drew in a deep breath, and opened it. Vincent stood there. He was soaked from head to toe, rain streaming down his face, his clothes plastered to his body. No umbrella, no raincoat, as if he had been standing out there for a long time before he finally decided to knock. His gray eyes met hers, and they were not cold the way they had been that day in the cabin. There was only exhaustion, and something that looked almost like pleading. Scarlett wanted to slam the door, wanted to scream at him to leave, and never come back. But she only stood there, fingers clenched around the edge of the door, saying nothing. "I'm not coming in," Vincent said, his voice partly swallowed by the rain. "I just want to talk. You can close the door any time you want." Scarlett did not close it. She did not invite him in, either. She only stood there and waited. Vincent drew in a long breath, as if gathering the courage for what he was about to say. "My parents were good people," he began, voice low and steady. "They had a small restaurant in Chicago. Our family's Italian place, passed down from my grandparents. They had nothing to do with the underworld." He paused. The rain kept pouring, relentless. "When I was 14, someone came and tried to buy the restaurant. They wanted to use it as a front for laundering money. My father refused." He looked straight at Scarlett. "A week later, my parents were assassinated right in front of me. In our own restaurant." Scarlett felt her throat tighten. She did not want to feel sympathy for him, but the image of a 14-year-old child watching his parents die was something she could not ignore. "My uncle, my father's younger brother, took me in," Vincent continued. "He was also the one who found the people who killed my parents, and he took revenge. I didn't know who my uncle really was until it happened. He was the boss of the Romano family." He fell silent for a moment, letting Scarlett absorb it. "I grew up in that world, not because I chose it, but because I had no other choice. My uncle was the only family I had left, and when he died 5 years ago, I became the boss." "Because you wanted power," Scarlett said, her voice colder than she meant it to be. Vincent shook his head. "Because if I didn't, our enemies would have killed everyone who stayed loyal to my uncle. Dozens of families, hundreds of people. They would have died just because I wanted to walk away clean." He stepped closer by a single pace. The rain still poured, but he seemed not to notice. "I'm not a good man, Scarlett. I've done things you will never forgive. But I have rules. No drugs, no harming women and children, no killing innocents. That's the line I will never cross." Scarlett looked at him, not knowing what to believe. She had heard too many lies in her life to trust anyone easily. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Vincent said, his voice softening. "I don't deserve forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth. All of it." He stopped. His gray eyes held hers with something she had never seen in him before. Not coldness, not control, but truth, raw and vulnerable. "And I care about you," he said, almost a whisper. "That's real. Whether you believe it or not, whether you want to see me again or not, it's real." Then he turned and walked away into the rain, his figure fading into the sheet of water. Scarlett stood there, watching him until the darkness swallowed him completely. She did not know what she felt. Anger, confusion, and something else. Something warm she did not want to admit. She closed the door, leaned back against the wall, and for the first time in 3 days, she cried. The next morning, Scarlett woke with swollen eyes and a body worn down to the bone. She had cried through the night, cried for herself, for what she had lost, for what she did not know whether she should hold on to. When she stepped out of her room, Maggie was already seated at the kitchen table, a cup of hot tea set in front of her, old eyes watching her granddaughter with worry. "Sit down," Maggie said, her voice gentle but leaving no room for refusal. "Tell me." Scarlett wanted to say there was nothing to tell, wanted to keep the secret the way she had for weeks, but when she looked into Maggie's eyes that had watched her grow from an abandoned child into a grown woman, she could not lie. She sat, wrapping her hands around the warm cup, and began. She told Maggie about the night in the woods, about the little girl screaming, about the injured woman. She told her about the man who stepped out of the darkness, who helped her find Rachel, who called a helicopter and brought them to the hospital. She told her about the meetings in the forest afterward, about long conversations, about how she had slowly opened up to a man she knew was dangerous. And she told her what she had seen in the cabin, about guns and cash, about his voice, cold as ice. She did not speak Vincent's name, but she told everything else. Maggie listened in silence, not interrupting, not judging. When Scarlett finished, she felt hollow, as if she had poured herself out, and there was nothing left inside. Maggie was quiet for a long time, wrinkled hands stroking the teacup in front of her. Then she asked, softly, "Are you afraid of him?" Scarlett thought about the question. She had been afraid when she saw the guns, afraid when she heard the coldness in his voice. But was she afraid of Vincent? Afraid of the man who had tucked a blanket around her when she nodded off? Afraid of the man who stood in the rain and told her the truth about his life? "No," she admitted. "I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid of what he represents." Maggie nodded, as if that was the answer she had been waiting for. "Do you know what separates a good person from a bad one?" Maggie asked. Scarlett shook her head. "Not their job," Maggie said. "Not where they come from, not what they did in the past. It's how they treat the people who are vulnerable." Maggie reached for Scarlett's hand, old eyes gentle. "He saved a child he did not know," Maggie went on. "He paid the hospital bill for a woman he had never met. He sent medicine to an old woman who is dying, asking for nothing, needing no thanks, wanting nothing in return." Scarlett felt tears rise again. "Those are the actions of a good man, sweetheart," Maggie said. "No matter what he does, no matter what world he lives in, those actions show his heart. And a heart like that is not the heart of an evil man." "But Grandma," Scarlett choked out. He's done things." Maggie nodded. "I know. And I'm not saying those things are right. But you told me about his childhood, about how he lost his parents, about how he had no choice. I'm asking you, Scarlett, if you were in that situation, what would you do?" Scarlett could not answer. She did not know. She had never thought about it that way. "You've suffered enough," Maggie said, her voice shaking. "You've fought alone for so many years. You deserve happiness. You deserve someone at your side, someone who cares about you, someone willing to do anything to protect you." Tears ran down Scarlett's cheeks, and she did not bother to wipe them away. "I don't know who he is," Maggie continued. "I don't know what he's done. But I know he stood in the rain to tell you the truth, and that takes courage. That takes a heart that can love." Maggie opened her arms, and Scarlett fell into them, clinging as if she were holding on to the only lifeline in open water. "Give both of you a chance," Maggie whispered against her ear, her hand smoothing Scarlett's auburn hair. "Give him the chance to prove who he is, and give yourself the chance to be happy." Scarlett cried in her grandmother's arms, cried like she had never been allowed to cry, for the orphan child she had been, for the abused girl, for the lonely woman she had been for so many years. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of being loved. It took Scarlett 2 days to gather the courage. 2 days spent turning Maggie's words over in her mind, replaying what Vincent had told her in the rain, replaying every moment they had shared over the past month. And when she finally made her decision, she knew it was the right one, even though it frightened her more than anything she had ever faced. That afternoon, Scarlett went to the rock overlook above the valley, the place where they had met so many times before. She did not know if Vincent would be there. She did not know if he would even want to see her after everything that had happened. But when she arrived, he was already there, sitting on the familiar stone, his back to her, looking out over the valley in the late afternoon light. He did not turn when he heard her footsteps. Maybe he already knew she was coming. Maybe he had been waiting for her for 2 days. Scarlett stopped a few steps behind him, her heart beating hard in her chest. "I have conditions," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady even as everything inside her trembled. Vincent turned. Those gray eyes met hers, no longer cold the way they had been before, holding only waiting, and a thin, Fragile hope. I'm listening, he said. Scarlett drew a deep breath, then began. I don't want to know the details of your work, she said. I don't want to know what you do, who you meet, how you handle problems. I don't want anything to do with your world. I don't want to meet the people in your organization. I don't want to become part of any of it. Vincent nodded, silent, listening. And if I ever find out you hurt innocent people, Scarlett continued, her voice turning harder. If you cross the lines you said you would never cross, I will leave. Immediately. No explanation. No second chances. She stopped and looked straight into his eyes. Can you accept that? Vincent stood and stepped closer. He did not touch her. He only stopped there, less than a step away, gray eyes holding hers with something she had never seen in him before, as if she were the most precious thing he had ever had, and he was afraid that if he moved too fast, she would vanish like morning mist. I accept, he said, voice low and certain. All of it. You will never have to see my world. You will never have to meet those people. And I will never do anything that makes you leave. Scarlett searched his face for any sign of a lie. She found none. Only sincerity, raw and unguarded. I can't change your past, she said, her voice softening. I can't pretend you're a normal man, like you don't live in the world you live in. Vincent said nothing. He only waited. But I believe in the man who put a blanket over me when I nodded off in the hospital. Scarlett went on, her voice shaking. I believe in the man who stayed awake all night to watch over a child he didn't know. I believe in the man who held the hand of a terrified little girl and promised to help her find her mother. I believe in the man who stood in the rain to tell me the truth, even though that truth could have made me never want to see you again. Tears began to slide down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. I believe in Vincent, she whispered. Not Boss Romano, not the man in that cabin, but Vincent, the man who showed me that behind the darkness, there can still be light. Vincent lifted his hand and gently wiped the tears from her face. It was the first time he had touched her, and Scarlett felt it like a current, right where his fingertips met her skin. Scarlett. He murmured her name like a prayer. Then he leaned down and kissed her. The kiss was gentle, like the brush of a butterfly against a flower. As if he was afraid that if he kissed her any harder, she would break. As if she was something he had waited for all his life, and now could not believe she was real. Scarlett closed her eyes and let herself sink into the warmth of his mouth against hers. Around them, Blackwood stood quiet and watchful, the sunset gilding the treetops, the wind moving softly with the scent of pine and damp earth. When they finally pulled apart, Scarlett opened her eyes and looked into Vincent's gray gaze. Not cold as steel anymore, only warmth, protection, and a silent promise. For the first time in 27 years, Scarlett Morgan felt safe. Not because Vincent was strong, not because he had power or money, but because, for the first time, someone looked at her and saw a person worthy of being loved. The next 2 months became the most beautiful stretch of Scarlett Morgan's life. She had never known happiness could be this simple. She had never known life could feel this light when there was someone beside her, sharing even the most ordinary moments. Vincent took her everywhere, to the most beautiful places in Montana, places she had never discovered even after 4 years living here. A crystal-clear lake hidden beyond a line of mountains, the water reflecting the sky like an enormous mirror. A wild meadow bursting with spring flowers, purple and yellow petals stretching all the way to the horizon. A mountain peak where they could see all of Blackwood from above, and Scarlett understood for the first time just how breathtaking the forest she had called home for 4 years truly was. But the moments she treasured most were not the grand ones, not the dramatic ones. They were the ordinary evenings in her small cabin, when she cooked and Vincent sat at the kitchen table, watching her with eyes she could not quite name the feeling inside. The first time she made him a simple dinner, just pasta with tomato sauce and ground beef, Vincent ate as if it were the best meal of his life. He did not say much, but the way he finished every bite, then looked at her with quiet gratitude, said everything. Later, when she asked, he admitted that since his parents died, he had not eaten homemade food, only restaurants, takeout, or lavish parties that were beautiful on the surface and empty underneath. Scarlett cried when she heard that, and from that day on, she cooked for him whenever she could. Maggie adored Vincent in her own way. They played chess every Sunday night, and Vincent always lost. At first, Scarlett thought he was letting Maggie win. Then she discovered the truth. Maggie was cheating. She moved pieces when Vincent was not looking, switched positions while he went to get water, and once she even hid his queen under the tablecloth. When Scarlett pointed it out, Maggie only shrugged and said that at her age, cheating was a privilege. Vincent laughed. A real laugh. Scarlett rarely heard from him, and kept losing to her with good-natured joy. Maggie's health improved dramatically with the new medication. When the doctor came for a routine checkup, he was stunned by the progress and said that at this rate, she could live at least 2 more years. Scarlett hugged her and cried when she heard that, and Maggie only patted her head the way she had when Scarlett was small, whispering that she was not going anywhere. Rachel and Emma recovered completely as well. Rachel's leg healed without any serious lasting damage. She started taking photographs again, and her first exhibit about Blackwood became a bigger success than she ever expected. Emma visited Scarlett often, calling her Miss Scarlett with a voice full of love, and calling Vincent Uncle Vincent, even though she had no idea who he truly was. Then one day, Scarlett came home after a shift and realized something was different. The cabin roof had been replaced. The old rusted tin sheets were gone, replaced by sturdy shingles that would not leak when it rained. The windows had been fitted with new glass, sealed tight, no longer letting cold wind slip through the cracks at night. And inside, a heating system had been installed, and the cabin was warm for the first time since she moved in. She knew immediately who had done it. When she confronted Vincent, he only shrugged and said he could not stand watching her shiver every morning anymore. Scarlett wanted to be angry, wanted to say he did not need to do that she did not need saving. But when she woke the next morning and, for the first time in 4 years, did not feel cold down to the bone, she could not find words for anything except thank you. But the moment that broke Scarlett open most completely came when Vincent took her to a construction site on the edge of town. A community clinic, he explained, for people with no insurance, no money for doctor visits, nowhere to go when they got sick. And when she lifted her eyes to the sign out front, she saw the name, the Eleanor Morgan Clinic. Her mother's name. Scarlett stood there, staring at the name of the woman who had died because she could not afford treatment, and she cried the way she had never cried before. Vincent did not speak. He only stood beside her, one hand resting gently on her back, letting her know she was not alone. And in that moment, Scarlett understood that this was happiness. Not the glittering kind they sold in movies, but the quiet kind, built out of dinners, cooked at home, crooked chess games, mornings that did not freeze her to the bone, and a name carved into a sign, so it would never be forgotten. Happiness never lasts forever. Scarlett had known that since she was a child, since the night her mother died and the bright world she knew collapsed in an instant. But she had let herself forget. She had let herself believe that maybe this time would be different. She was wrong. The first signs came so subtly that Scarlett almost missed them. A strange feeling on patrol, as if someone were watching her from behind the trees. She turned more than once and saw nothing. Only branches swaying in the wind and distant birdsong. She told herself she was imagining it, that 4 years alone in the forest had made her too sensitive to unfamiliar sounds. But the feeling did not go away. It followed her every day, every shift, every time she walked those familiar trails alone. And then she started to notice the small things. Unfamiliar footprints in damp soil that did not belong to tourists. Broken branches snapped in a way that did not look natural. And once, just once, she caught the glint of reflected light from a pair of binoculars on a high rocky ledge. She told Vincent, and she saw his jaw tighten. He did not say much. He only kissed her forehead and told her she did not need to worry. But Scarlett had learned to read him well enough to know that beneath that calm, something was happening. Then that day came. Scarlett and Maggie had gone into town for a routine checkup, a trip that took nearly the whole day. When they returned, Scarlett knew immediately something was wrong. The cabin door was not forced. The lock was still intact, but she could feel it in the air. Something off, something wrong. She told Maggie to wait outside and went in alone. The cabin looked normal. Nothing disturbed, nothing missing. Everything was in its place, even the small savings she kept hidden in a drawer. But when she stepped into her bedroom, her heart stopped. On her bed, set neatly on the white pillow, was a black rose, and beside it, a small note. Scarlett picked up the paper with trembling fingers. There was only one line, written in red ink like blood. "We know who she is." She called Vincent immediately. He arrived within 20 minutes, faster than he ever had before. When he saw the black rose and the note, the color drained from his face. "Nikolai Volkov," he said, his voice colder than anything Scarlett had ever heard. "He found you." Scarlett did not ask who Nikolai Volkov was. She had promised not to involve herself in Vincent's world, and she kept that promise. But she could see something in Vincent's eyes she had never seen before. Fear. Not fear for himself, fear for her. Vincent took her hand, gripping hard enough to almost hurt. "You and Maggie have to leave," he said, urgency sharpening every word. "I have a safe place in Canada. No one knows about it. You'll stay there until I deal with this." Scarlett looked at him. into those gray eyes flooding with worry, and she understood he was trying to protect her the only way he knew. Send her far away, hide her from danger, keep her safe while he faced the darkness alone. But she could not do that. No, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm not going anywhere. Vincent stared at her as if she had said something insane. Scarlett, you don't understand. He's dangerous. He'll use you to get to me. I understand, she cut in. Better than you think. But I'm not running anymore. She lifted her hand to his face, forcing him to look at her. I've been running my whole life, Vincent. From my father when he left. From foster families who treated me like I was nothing. From Daniel when he almost killed me. I ran, and ran, and ran, until I didn't even know what I was running toward anymore. Tears started down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. I'm not running anymore, she said, her voice shaking but sure. For the first time in my life, I have something worth staying for. Someone worth fighting for. I'm staying with you, no matter what happens. Vincent looked at her for a long moment, gray eyes full of feelings she could not name. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as if he were afraid she would disappear. They stood that way for a long time in the small cabin, the black rose still lying on the bed like a silent threat. Then they began to plan. Scarlett spread the map of Blackwood across the table, the same map she knew by heart after 4 years as a ranger. She showed Vincent every trail, every ravine, every hiding place. She knew this forest like her own palm. Knew places no one else knew. Shortcuts not marked on any official map. If they want to come here, she said, her finger tracing the map, they'll have to come through my territory. And for the first time since he saw the black rose, Vincent smiled. 3 days later, everything was ready. Vincent and his team studied every detail on the map Scarlett had drawn, every hidden trail only she knew, every ravine that could serve as cover, every high point that could watch the forest like an open hand. Marcus positioned men at strategic locations, and they waited. Maggie was moved to a safe place in the next town, under the protection of 2 men Vincent trusted most. She did not want to go, especially after learning Scarlett would stay behind. But in the end she agreed after Scarlett promised she would be careful. When Scarlett hugged her goodbye, her throat tightened, but she did not cry. She could not cry now. On the 4th night, Nikolai Volkov attacked. They came at 2 a.m, when the darkness was thickest and Blackwood lay in a dead, breathless silence. 12 men, armed with heavy weapons, moved toward Vincent's cabin from 3 different directions. They believed they were arriving unseen. They did not know that for 2 days Vincent's people had been tracking every step they took. The fight did not look like a movie. There were no roaring gunshots shaking the sky, no dramatic chases. This was a battle of tactics, of patience, of knowing the terrain better than the enemy. Vincent's men closed in slowly, isolating smaller groups, cutting off communication, driving them into dead-end ravines Scarlett had marked on the map. An hour later, 9 of Volkov's 12 men were in custody without a single shot fired, but Nikolai was not among them. Scarlett was in a small cabin Vincent had prepared for her, about 2 kilometers south of the main fight. She had been ordered to stay there and not step outside, no matter what happened. She had agreed, even though every second made her want to run to Vincent to make sure he was safe. She was sitting in the darkness, listening to the night forest, when the door flew open. A man stepped inside, tall, silver hair, eyes a cold, pale blue. He wore black from head to toe, and in his hand was a gun aimed straight at her. Nikolai Volkov. Scarlett jumped to her feet, her heart pounding, but she did not scream. She had learned to control fear a long time ago. So you're the one who makes Vincent Romano lose focus, Nikolai said, a note of surprise in his voice as he looked her over. I expected some dazzling beauty. Didn't think it would be a small-time ranger. He moved closer, the gun never leaving her. Now you're going to call your lover and tell him to come here. Alone. No weapons. Scarlett stared him straight in the eyes, and did something Nikolai did not expect. She smiled, not a happy smile. The smile of someone who had faced too many fears in life to be frightened by one more. You think he'll come for me? She asked, her voice strangely calm. You think he'll trade his life to save mine? Nikolai's brow tightened, clearly not understanding. He won't come, Scarlett continued, every word steady as steel. Because he knows I don't want him to die for me. Because he knows that if he dies, I'll never forgive myself. He knows I love him enough to want him alive, even if that means I have to die. Nikolai stood there, the gun still trained on her, but something in his eyes shifted. The confidence he had walked in with gave way to confusion. He had used this tactic before, leveraged loved ones to control his enemies, but he had never met anyone like Scarlett. You're lying, he said, but his voice was no longer as certain. I'm not lying, Scarlett said. I've been running my whole life. From people who hurt me, from places that broke me. But I'm not running anymore. If I die tonight, I'll die as someone who stood her ground. And you won't get what you want. Nikolai opened his mouth to say something, but he did not have the chance. A shadow rose behind him, fast and silent as darkness itself. Before Nikolai could react, the gun was knocked from his hand, and he was slammed to the floor with a heavy thud. Vincent stood over him. The barrel of his gun pointed straight at Nikolai's forehead, gray eyes colder than Scarlett had ever seen them. "She's right," Vincent said, his voice empty of emotion. "I won't trade my life for hers, but I also won't let her die." Marcus and 2 other men appeared in the doorway, moving in to restrain Nikolai. As they hauled him outside, Vincent turned toward Scarlett, and the hardness in his gaze softened. "Are you hurt?" Scarlett shook her head, unable to speak. Her legs began to tremble, the calm she had forced herself to hold through her conversation with Nikolai finally collapsing. Vincent stepped to her and pulled her into his arms, and she cried from relief, from fear, from the simple fact that it was over. Nikolai Volkov was handed over to the FBI the next morning. He had committed too many crimes that authorities had wanted to prosecute for a long time, and Vincent provided enough evidence to ensure he would never walk free again. The threat was gone. And that night, as they sat together in the small cabin, Vincent told Scarlett something she never expected. "I'm going to stop," he said, his voice weary but certain. "I'm going to transition everything into legitimate business. It will take time, but I'll do it. For you. For us." Scarlett looked at him, and for the first time, she saw a future, not darkness. Light. 6 months later, on an autumn afternoon when the leaves had begun to turn gold and red, Vincent took Scarlett to a familiar place. She did not know where they were going until she recognized the trail leading to Eagle's Drop, the ravine where they had found Rachel on that fateful night nearly a year ago. But when they arrived, Scarlett stopped short. Stunned, everything was different. The dangerous ravine from that year had been rebuilt into a safe overlook. Solid wooden steps led down to a wide stone platform. A steel railing circled the edge, and from there, the entire valley spread out below them, beneath a breathtaking sunset. Right at the entrance, a polished brass plaque was mounted on a wooden post. "Rachel Turner Overlook. In memory of the night kindness saved a life." Scarlett turned to Vincent, her eyes already burning. "You did this." Vincent nodded, gray eyes resting on her with the gentle warmth she had learned to love. "This place changed my life," he said. "That night, I was just a lonely man running from himself. Then I heard a child screaming, and I met you." He guided her down the steps, onto the platform where the whole of Blackwood lay beneath the amber light of evening. A soft wind moved through the pines, carrying the scent of sap and damp earth, a scent Scarlett had called home for so many years. Then Vincent sank to one knee. Scarlett's heart missed a beat. He pulled out a small box and opened it. Inside was a ring, simple but elegant, set with a green stone that caught the light, like the deep heart of Blackwood itself. "Scarlett Morgan," Vincent said, his voice trembling slightly, and for the first time she saw him lose his usual composure. "In this place, you saved me. Not my life, my soul. You pulled me out of the darkness, out of the loneliness I thought I would drown in forever. You showed me I could be better, that I could deserve love." Tears slid down Scarlett's cheeks, and she did not wipe them away. "Will you marry me?" Vincent asked, gray eyes holding all the love and hope he had. Scarlett did not need to think. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Vincent rose, slipped the ring onto her finger, and kissed her under a sunset slowly fading into dusk. Around them, Blackwood stood silent and watchful, as if the forest itself were smiling. The wedding was held a month later, right in Blackwood, beneath the ancient pines Scarlett had loved for so many years. It was not a lavish wedding with hundreds of guests. Only the people who mattered most were there. Maggie, Rachel, and Emma, Gloria, Marcus, and a few close friends. Maggie stood to give a speech, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. "I have raised Scarlett since she was 15, she said, eyes on her granddaughter with a love so fierce it hurt to witness. "I watched her grow up. I watched her fight. I watched her fall and then stand again. And I worried there would be no one beside her when I was gone." She paused, tears rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. "But now I can rest easy. At last, someone will take care of my girl." When she hugged Scarlett, they both cried. And Vincent stood beside them, gray eyes bright with tears too, even though he would never admit it. 3 years later, Maggie passed away in her sleep, peaceful and without pain. She had lived her last years in the greatest happiness she had known, watching her granddaughter marry, cheating at chess with her son-in-law every Sunday night, and knowing Scarlett would not be alone anymore. Rachel Turner became a celebrated photographer, her images of Blackwood exhibited across the country. She always told the story of the night that changed her life, of the brave ranger and the mysterious man who saved her. Emma grew up dreaming of becoming a ranger like Scarlett. Every summer she visited Blackwood, learning to recognize birds by their calls, learning to read tracks in the soil, learning how to love the living world. Vincent left the underworld completely. He handed everything over to people he trusted and began a new life. He ran a charity fund named for Eleanor Morgan, building more community clinics, helping people who could not afford treatment. He found redemption not in power or money, but in doing good for others. Scarlett became the director of the Blackwood Forest Preserve, turning the place she loved into something protected and cherished. She trained young rangers, taught them how to love the land, taught them that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act while afraid. And Daniel, the man Scarlett once had to run from, he was arrested for abusing another woman, and Scarlett was not surprised to learn Vincent had quietly provided the police with evidence. Justice, at last, was done, and every year, on the anniversary of the night they met, Scarlett and Vincent returned to the Rachel Turner Overlook, sat side by side watching the sunset, and remembered the night a child's scream changed their lives forever. Sometimes darkness is not something to fear. Sometimes darkness is only the place where light has not reached yet, and all it takes is the courage to step in. The story of Scarlett and Vincent leaves us with many precious lessons about life. That the past does not define who we are, but how we treat others does. That kindness can spread and change the lives of those around us. That we deserve love, no matter how much we have suffered. And that sometimes, the best things come from the places we least expect. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, press like, and share this video with the people you love so they can hear meaningful stories each day as well. We would truly love to know how you feel about this story. Do you see yourself in Scarlett? Do you believe a person can change the way Vincent did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We always want to hear what is deepest in your heart. We wish all of you watching this video strong health, a joyful life, and peace in every day. Thank you for staying with us to the end of the story. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.